You cannot have the lava background, because this is not Hammered Out. Hammered Out gets the lava background. This is just a stream with another YouTuber, so we are now underwater. No lava today, just water. How's it going, everybody? And in an ideal world, no Suris face. Look, in an ideal world, this wouldn't happen. But it is not an ideal world, so instead, you get no. Just no. And that's going to stay there forever. Anytime somebody says something stupid on a stream, I'm just going to go, no, you're wrong. Just no. That said.
Hey, at least it's not the face.
I mean, it could be. I can easily make it the face, too. But that all said, how is everybody doing today? Hopefully you are having a wonderful time. It is Wednesday, which means it is hump day, which means if you're an incel, you're probably really upset because that word is bad for you. For reasons. I hope I don't have to explain that joke to anybody. If I do, then it's not going to make it any funnier. Anywho.
Oh, but explaining the joke makes everything funnier. Just ask Ocean.
Yep, explaining the joke makes it better. I have to put on chapstick real quick because my lips are apparently a war zone. And the dry air outside is not helping. So I'm going to take care of that. But while I take care of that, I am going to introduce the guest on my channel today, who is Aliakai, who is definitely not a new guest here. I think she's taken up like semi-permanent residence in certain places of this channel. Get out of my house.
Look, you were the one who asked me to moderate your debate, all right? Like,
look, out of my fucking house. I don't need you here.
Apologies to anybody, by the way, who's used to me being a bit louder. I have some kind of cold. I'm hoping it's not strep. It's definitely not COVID because everything doesn't taste like ashes, so I'm glad I didn't get it again. But my throat hurts like hell, and so I have to kind of talk quiet because, like, talking too loudly hurts. But this is an important story that we're going to be talking about, both of them. So I wanted to make sure that I actually showed up to do that.
Yeah, originally, she wanted me to try to do a video on this. I was like, hey, is this a thing you'd want to do a video on? And the answer is yes, but I also have, like, very thin layers of time, and every single time something goes wrong in my life, all of those layers just get flattened into one pancake, and it's not fun. So I was just like, you know what? No. Instead of a video Wednesday, we're going to do a live stream. It's going to be a live stream. It's going to be me and you. We're going to talk about this. Mostly, I'm going to let you talk and present on this issue and talk with the audience. But there are some ways in which this has happened over in my state as well, so I'm going to be talking about those a bit. But mostly I am going to let you have the reins here. And I'm trying to pad out speech because my notes are on my phone. There it is. Found it. I'm just like, I know that when I talk about it, I'm going to need my notes because my memory is garbage, but where are my notes?
So thankfully, Suris did put some of the links that I sent him in the description. There was one that he missed, and I'll put that in the live chat as well. But what I wanted to talk about was there's the story that I've been following coming out of California about the California GOP ballot harvesting. And in order to kind of get into that, we need to talk a little bit about what ballot harvesting is. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the term, the it's the CBS link, I think, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it's the CBS News link explains what ballot harvesting is. So in some states, it's technically legal for a friend or family member to deliver your ballot for you. That's what ballot harvesting is. And if I'm trying to think, there are several states in which only like your immediate family can do it. So like your mom or your husband or your kids or something like that, they can do that for you. But some states, because of COVID, including California, have expanded this ability to, you know, include members of your household or even just somebody who you know who's willing to take it in. Now, there are regulations around this. If you are not the person and you're not related to the person directly, in several states, including Cali, you have to get a witness signature that the ballot was untampered with when you brought it to the post office or ballot box or something else. And you also have to put your own name on it so that if there's a problem with the ballot, they can contact you and make sure that you didn't screw with it. So there's a lot of protections in place. And Georgia actually is one of the states that allows for other people to deliver ballots. And because of the wider restrictions in some states like Cali, there are like nonprofits and things that will go door to door and collect ballots at places like old folks' homes, and like assisted living facilities. And in neighborhoods where there's high like poverty rates and things, people might have a harder time getting, say, postage. In states like mine, where everybody, up until a couple of years ago, everybody voted by mail. That's just the way that it goes. There are in-person polling places, but they're not popular at all because everybody just gets absentee ballots several weeks beforehand and a voter's pamphlet that tells you everything about the election. But for the longest time, you had to have postage. And so a lot of poorer people didn't vote because they needed postage. And these nonprofits would go out and they would knock on people's doors and be like, hey, we'll deliver your ballot straight to a ballot box or election officials for you. And there was paper trails regarding that, where the person who collected your ballot had to sign off on it. And then the organization had to sign off on it. And then the voting official they delivered it to also had to sign off on it. So there's this whole thing where you could see very clearly who had touched your ballot. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, now we come to the California GOP. What they did was they decided to, in several counties, set up these unauthorized ballot boxes. And they were set up to look exactly like regular ballot boxes. The Sacramento Bee is the article that I am now referencing for this, because it was the first one that I read, but LA Times also picked it up. Basically the California State Electoral Commission was like, nah, you can't do this, fam. Like, that's not okay. Because they looked like the secure boxes, but they were not published under the regulations that one would need to in order for them to qualify as actual secure boxes. These are like just basically setups like your common layperson could get. They could be an IKEA tub for all we know, that is just set up to look like a secure drop-off location. And technically, they won't provide any information about where these ballot boxes are to the Electoral Commission, nor who has touched those ballots, or whose ballots they were. None of the signatures and other regulations that go along with ballot harvesting, if like you or I were to take, your mom's ballot or, your friend's ballot to the post office, apply. There's none of that paper is being kept track of. So we don't know if they're going through with ballots. We don't know if they're tampering with them, and they won't give any information out at all. So, breaking news, either this morning or last night, I'm not entirely sure when the article was published, but the California Attorney General apparently agrees with the Electoral Commission and just put out a request to courts to subpoena the information about where these fake ballot boxes are and whose ballots have passed through them and who's been touching those ballots. So that's where we're at with the California Attorney General. One of the big concerns here with the complete lack of paperwork is we don't know if ballots are being screened in any way. Like if they're not delivering ballots that say vote for Democratic candidates, or if they're placing them in Democratic areas primarily or just Republican areas. Like, we don't know anything about what they're doing to these ballots.
Which creates kind of a problem, because one of the things when you have a ballot drop-off location is you should be allowed to track that ballot and see if it's been received, so that you know that your vote actually got counted. And if they have no way of guaranteeing that a ballot is actually being counted, then what's the if they don't have anything in place for that, then is there potentially another ulterior motive here? Because without that in place, without a promise that, hey, you can track this thing, we can guarantee that that your ballot's going to a good place, what's to stop them from putting these up, say, in more Democratic areas, and then Democrat is in the political party, not Democrat is in the way we fucking vote, but putting them up in more Democratic areas, and then just people dropping off their ballots, and then suddenly their ballots never get received, and they have no way of figuring out if it got received or not. It's impossible for them to.
Yeah, and I don't know if California has a ballot tracking system similar to the one in Washington, where if you vote absentee, which again, everybody in my state does, you're automatically enrolled to get a ballot by mail unless you specifically check a box saying that you don't want that, which a lot of homeless people, they still have the right to vote here. They don't, obviously. They go and they vote in person. But if you do have an absentee ballot here, there's actually a website you can go on with your, like, that's from the government, it's from our electoral commission, where you can put in your like voter ID number, or you can put in your address and select from a group of names, and you have to like prove your last 4 digits of your social security number and other stuff. And you can update your address. You can check to see where your ballot is, if it's in the mail, like if it still hasn't gotten to you, or if you sent it out, like if it's been accepted or not, or if it's been challenged, and you can deal with stuff there. I don't know if Cali has a similar system. I highly suggest that folks go to the websites of their respective states to see if your state has a similar tracking system, if you're concerned about like where your ballot is. But when you have people dropping ballots off at these drop boxes, we don't know what the timetable of them getting delivered is, and you might not find out that your ballot was never delivered until after election day. And that's another big concern, is even if you've got these tracking services, even up here in Washington, if our GOP were to do that, like if you drop your ballot off in the box, well, you don't know how long it's going to take for them to deliver them, right? Like you don't know how often those are emptied, and you don't know who's touching them, which again, that's kind of terrifying. I don't even know if the GOP knows.
And speaking of things that we don't know, give me just a second. I need to go let Growlithe out. I will let you continue with the stream. But as much as I want to respond, I have to keep on muting my microphone because Growlithe is sitting here going, Borf! 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 Like that! Just like that!
So much Borf. So Nathaniel Walters says, because voting is public record, every state is required to have online tracking. That's good to know. And I didn't know that everybody in California also received a mail-in ballot this year. That's also good to know. But yeah, as far as the stuff in California goes, the state GOP is trying to argue that because of ballot harvesting, because if you go door to door, you could potentially, as like, you know, I mentioned with like, sorry, I'm sick. Like I mentioned with the nonprofits that go like door to door out here in Washington, you have an individual person who knocked on your door and they have to sign off. They're trying to claim that having a ballot harvesting box, because that person could be carrying a bag or a tub from IKEA or something, there's no limitation in the law about the collection container that could be used for ballots. That's no different having a ballot box than having somebody go door to door. Problem is, according to the Electoral Commission, because of both the deceptive nature of these boxes and the fact that we don't have any way to track who has touched them, this is not at all the case. We're comparing apples to like frickin' rats.
And I just got back, so I heard the latter part of that.
So I was talking about the GOP's argument in favor of their doing these collection boxes, how they said that it's basically the same as a, like if you had a bag and you were going door to door and you just collected ballots in a bag or in an IKEA container. And
but the difference is that if you were, that's not a solid defense though, because the difference between a person with a ballot bag and a box is the absence of a person. Like, well, there's a definite distinction.
Well, and that's actually what the representative from the Electoral Commission in one of the articles had stated, was all of this would be totally legal if it was just a person standing there collecting these ballots into a bag, because then we'd have an individual signature and we'd know whose hands they passed through, etc. We'd have accountability. With a box, you don't have a chain of accountability at all. And again, we come back to the fact that these boxes, we don't know if they're built to the standard of like secure collection containers. So for all you know, it could just not even be the GOP that screws with it. Somebody might smash one of those boxes open and steal a whole bunch of ballots, and we have no way to know because they're not secure collection containers, but they're set up to look like them.
And I think that because they're set up and these ballot boxes look identical. Like, do you you had an image that you sent to me of them before? Do you still have that image you can send so I can show the chat what one of these boxes looks like in comparison to like an official voting box?
Yeah, let me see if I can find it again. Let's see. I think it was in the California GOP comparison article because it had the official ballot box versus the other one in there. So give me a second, I'll pull it up.
Sure. And while you are taking care of that, I do want to point out that it strikes me as kind of insidious because if this were just a standard like a person, right? Like we said, and like the commission found, this would be fine if it was just a person. But because the boxes are dressed up to look like official ballot boxes, it's like it's like when the GOP would engage in using euphemisms, which seems to have kind of died out with the current political party. It seems like the same thing that used to happen with euphemisms being used in political speech all the time, is that this was stuff that would be used specifically to make sure that the general populace couldn't tell what was going on. And so they would get suckered into these things. Like, what's a euphemism that I can use to demonstrate this? States' rights, right? Most people in my chat probably understand what the states' rights euphemism actually means, right? Give me an H in the chat if you understand the dog whistle behind states' rights. Give me a G if you don't. I'll gladly explain. But this ballot box thing strikes me as the same kind of method that is used there, where you put something that's like innocuous and you throw it out there like the ballot box, and then people put their votes in there, and then you could just kind of selectively choose, hey, this one voted Republican, we'll use them. This one voted Democrat, we're not going to take them in. And because there's no way to know who did it, who can you actually hold accountable? Like, with no tracking and no way to determine what has actually happened with individual ballots, they could just get rid of any votes that they don't like. Or even worse, put these boxes in, like I said earlier, more Democratic areas that they just don't want to have them. This is not unlike what Kemp has done here, just very opposite.
Okay, so I sent you a picture of the official Dropbox, and then there are a couple of examples of unofficial ones. This one's a lot less convincing than the one that I sent you a while back, but I'm going to try to get the image location on it. I found a video as well from ABC 7 News that kind of shows what one of the boxes looks like. But I'm trying to find, I can't find the image that I initially sent you, which I'm frustrated with, because that was a little bit ago.
This one will work a little bit for the demonstration temporarily.
Oh, here it is. Here it is. I found it. So this is a, so that's an official ballot Dropbox. This image that I'm about to send you is one of the fake ones.
Okay.
So they're dressed up to look very much the same.
So if you are a first-time voter, how could you, if you came across this box first, this one I'm showing here. It's got an official website here, lavote.net. It's got tampering with this ballot box is a felony. It's got all this stuff. The only thing it doesn't have on here is saying official ballot drop box. If you were a first-time voter, what would stop you from just using this ballot box? And while I have that image here, while you guys do the what's the difference between these two images, because they look remarkably similar down to the color coordination, the only difference is that, of course, one says official ballot box, but if you saw the other one first, like you saw this one first and not this one, how are you going to know, especially if you're a first-time voter? And you can make an argument, well, they should have been a more informed voter. America has done a very damn good job at keeping people from being informed voters. Like, that's just a thing America has done for a long time. But I did see a couple of G's in the chat when I mentioned the states' rights thing. So let's go ahead and talk about that real quick, because it does pertain to this. It's the same mentality that is used to sucker people into shit like this. Okay? Mm-hmm. The states' rights statement is usually if somebody's talking about civil war. This is also a thing that you hear when you're talking about abortion. But generally speaking, this is a Civil War thing. When somebody says, what was the Civil War fought over? And if you answer slavery and they go, nuh-uh, it was over states' rights. This is a problem of states' rights. Okay. The default answer here is states' rights to what? What specific right of the states was being fought over? And then when you say that, then they have to default into slavery, unless they just try to kick the can further. But the states' rights thing is a smokescreen. Because if I just say states' rights, and you are a politically uninformed person, which is not a bad thing to be, that is just most of America, right? Like, that's just how people get out of the public education system. Which I'm going to be trying to do a video on a little later. I believe I might actually have my old world history teacher on my channel to talk about this. But that's a maybe. If you guys do want to see that episode, give me an H in chat with my old world history teacher talking about the U.S. public education system. I'm still in talks.
I sent you one of the less convincing ones, too. There are also ones like this where they've got signs taping on them that says official ballot drop box, but they look nothing like the official ones.
I'll throw that one up here as well for people to see. So here's the thing that happens with the states' rights thing. When you have that conversation about the Civil War and somebody says states' rights, what are they trying to do? Because they're not trying to be honest. They're trying to move the goalpost back a bit so that it sounds more innocuous. So that if you're a less informed person politically, when you hear states' rights, you go, yeah, states' rights, that's a good thing. I want my state to have rights. Why wouldn't I want my state to have rights? I live in a state. It's like saying you want states in a society. We live in a society, right, guys? So, I want my state to have rights. That's a thing I want. Why wouldn't I want that? So then you start arguing the same thing. Because usually if you're not super politically informed, you don't have a reason to kind of like Socratically push someone down the road here. So you end up saying the same thing. The Civil War wasn't fought over slavery. It was fought over states' rights. I mean, yeah, slavery was a small part of it, but I mean, really, it was just about states' rights. You end up saying the same thing. And then the next politically uninformed person hears that. It intuitively makes sense, so then they repeat it later. And that's kind of the goal. Because the goal of the first person is not to be honest with you. The goal of the first person is to convince you that this methodology of looking at our American history is a good thing to do. And so they give you the euphemism, the states' rights euphemism. But what is the euphemism for? It is so that you move the conversation away from slavery, which inevitably moves the conversation further away from civil rights. The purpose of this is not to be honest with you about what the Civil War was fought over, about American history. The purpose of this euphemism is to make you, and then the next politically inept person down the road, repeat the mantra of states' rights, so that the next time that you hear something about abortion, for instance, and then somebody says, no, we don't want federally mandated legally abortion. We want this to be handled on the states level because states' rights are important. So you hear it again, and it was intuitively correct the first time, right? So it must be intuitively correct again, and there's the purpose of the euphemism. This is why euphemisms have been used by the GOP, or really by politicians in general, but a lot of times by Republicans. This is a thing that is engaged in a lot in the political sphere, is that there's this double talk where you use the euphemism as a smokescreen. So let's transfer this mentality to the ballot boxes. This ballot box over here is a smokescreen. Whether or not this gets counted officially, it doesn't matter. It is the fact that this is not a legally allowed voting box without legal accountability. This is a smokescreen. There are things that can be done with this voting box that cannot be done with this voting box, because with this voting box, there is accountability baked into it through legislation. With this voting box, without that same accountability, which is the issue that's actually at hand, without that accountability, you can do things with this voting box you can't do otherwise. Like, it's the difference between showing a video live and showing an edited video. An edited video allows you to curate the content that your viewer sees, and a live video gives you all context.
One of the people in your chat had given you a super chat. Robert says that the second one that I had posted was an official ballot box. The article that I was reading flagged that one as one of the fake ones alongside the gray ones. So I'm not entirely sure. That might have been a mistake on the part of the article writers. The gray ones I do know are definitely fake, and there are others that had been flagged as fake, and one of the contentions was that they had been disguised to look the same as the official ones. So even if the one there is an official Dropbox, the second one, there are ones that are disguised to look the same. I just don't know if I can find the image comparing the two again, because I had sent one from a news article, but that news article has disappeared beneath an avalanche of people covering the story.
So when I look up fake ballot boxes California, I still see that exact ballot box image. Even if that particular one is a real ballot box, the issue still is that the fake ones are being propped up, which then of course we would just substitute this one here. But I am going to do a little bit more research into this real quick. Said that they were putting 8x11 papers with official in the gray ones. Oh, you mean like these ones right here? Saying official? Because either way, like, all the same arguments still work for this ballot box here. It doesn't look as similar, but the issue is the ill-informed voter. The issue is the person who does not know. Like, that person still gets fooled by something like this. Because if you're a first-time voter, this doesn't look conspicuous to you, because for something to look conspicuous, you have to have something legitimate to juxtapose it to. If you have no way to juxtapose it, then there's no red flags. It's like being in an abusive relationship for the first time in your life. You don't really have red flags yet, because you don't know what a red flag looks like.
Well, and not only that, but abusers don't exactly start by hitting you. That's not how those relationships start, right? But as far as the ballot boxes go, there were allegations in the lawsuit about disguising ballot boxes to look like the official ones and dressing them up to look that way. So I'll see if I can find more, but that image that I sent you is everywhere and flagged by quite a few people as not being an official one. So I have no idea if that's, if it was just a misflagging by the article.
Also, I do want to thank Going Down. If I can I please see all this? Yay! We do have a $2 super chat from Carpathia of Lilim. Bark for Growlith. I will not bark. Anyway, we do have a $2 super chat from Robert Zaz. That is the one that said those are both real drop boxes, which led into the conversation about if that is in fact a real drop box, aside from the fact that ones have been disguised, as per talked about in the article. The conversation still exists. It just exists as far as this other one is concerned. And then Nervardia did a super chat, $2 Australian traditional FARC you, to YouTube PayPal donation your way. Thank you very much for the traditional PayPal. PayPal. That's, I can tell I woke up recently.
PayPal.
Pain pal. For the masochist in you.
I'm sure your perpetual sponsor will be quite proud of you for that one.
Did you see the tweet about that?
Mm-mm.
So there's a company, I do want to talk about this real quick. It's not related to the conversation here, but it is about a particular sponsorship. There is a potential sponsorship that's trying to grab me, but they're for a game called Door Kickers, and they're willing to pay me a little bit, not enough to cover all the water damage in the house that I need to take care of, but of course I don't think any sponsorship's going to cover all that shit. So I'm really tempted to take it, but they're sending me their contract in a docm file format, and if you open up a docm file, docm is a 2007 Microsoft Word document, but the M stands for macro. It has the ability to open up macros, which means that it can be an executable for a virus just as quickly as anything else. So I'm really hesitant to even open up this contract to view it to see if I want to do this. Because there's a part of me that's like, I'm poor and also have to repair my house. I should do this. There's another part of me that goes, But if this gets my channel stolen again, then it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I can see the gambit there. Then again, you've had some fuckery with offers in the past.
Yeah, that's
how your channel got stolen, wasn't it?
That's how the channel got stolen, and not just mine. Recently, this happened to Channel Pup as well. He just got his channel back, and did a video which I actually appeared in, talking about how his channel got stolen. So, in fact, actually, let's go.
We had a question, by the way, from the chat that I wanted to handle really quick, if that's
Sure.
okay. So Aunt Jer says, if I just go to a ballot box that has the address listed in my voter's pamphlet, is that a safe bet? The answer in Washington is yes. I'm pretty sure that most other states' electoral commissions have, like, where you can go if they have, again, absentee voting, they should have listings on their website also for officially sanctioned voter boxes as well. Appalachia Folk Witch gave a $5 super chat. There's where'smyballot.com. It lists the states that have ballot tracking with links to your state government site. You can check the status of your ballot.
And please go ahead and use that site if you have already voted. For me personally, I don't trust Brian Kemp, so I am voting in person the day of, because fuck.
We're going to be talking about that in a minute, aren't we?
Yeah, there's a history of voter suppression in my state, so I do not. I do not trust any version of voting right now that is not in person for my state specifically, which kind of sucks considering that's the situation that he wants. But we will talk about that here in a bit. For those in the chat, though, throw this in your tab if you have not seen it already. Not necessarily a thing to watch right now, but this is the video from Channel Pup. When his channel got stolen that I appear in, talking about the channel getting stolen, and it is the reason why I am so trepidatious about this potential sponsorship. If you guys see me do a sponsorship on my channel that is not DDLG Playground at some point soon, then you know that I took it, but we'll see. I'm worried. So toss this in a tab and just let it sit there. Whenever the stream is over, go ahead and give it a look, because it's scary. It's scary shit, especially when this is your livelihood. Do I mind going 5% faster? I do actually mind going 5% faster. I'm going as fast as I currently can. So if you don't want me to be Sonic the Hedgehog, then here's where we'll be. Jeffrey Walls does say put a .m file in a virtual fresh machine and try it there to see if it's legit. That's that is an option that I should probably use. I don't actually have a virtual machine installed on this computer yet, so I need to do that. That all said, back to the topic at hand, outside of channel thievery bullshit, which I will apparently never be able to escape as long as I'm on YouTube.
Hey, thievery is technically, like, well within the potential auspices of this particular stream, considering what we've been talking about with the GOP.
Like stealing elections?
Yeah, so you apparently told me about some really interesting things going on in your state that just made me glad I don't live in the South.
This is how I feel living here. I just got this blitz fire. I wonder how hard it fires into my... Ow! Yep, that's well worth it.
You're special, Suris.
That, I now know how powerful a blitz fire is, and the answer is, for the money, decently powerful. Holy ow. That was painful. That was actually quite painful. Nervardia says, do you think voting should be compulsory? Because I think if it was, they couldn't do voter suppression. I actually do believe that voting should be compulsory. I believe that if you live in a democratic country, you cannot truly have a popular vote or anything be counted truly unless everybody has to vote. And I think by having forced voting, make it legally mandated voting, you must legally participate in your country, then that will also mean that not only is it harder to do voter suppression, you also have to encourage things like having a national voting day where everybody, like having 2 national voting days where everybody gets off work one of the 2 days to go vote, so that you can still have your economy running, on both days. You just have people sign up which day.
Or either that, or, you guys could, join the bandwagon of states like mine where everybody gets their ballot, weeks ahead of time, and you don't even have to pay to send it out. Like, we get a voters pamphlet, two of them actually, during national elections, where we have a state voters pamphlet that is for all of your local stuff, like within your county, and a countrywide voters pamphlet that talks about things like senatorial races, congressional, like representative races, and has statements from all of the candidates, and every single bill that is going to be up on the ballot also has a statement for and against. So you don't have to do any Googling or anything, like, it's all right there. And you can also read the full text of any bill that is up for vote.
Herkel says, if it's compulsory, though, couldn't the Republicans or other racists go, oh, you can't vote? Here's the $500 fine. Oh, you can't pay time for prison and prison labor. So that's a thing. You could go that route, but from what I understand in Australia, the way that compulsory voting works is that if you don't vote, it's a $50 fine. It is an inconvenient fine. That is not necessarily one that's going to like send you behind bars. But the issue is, if you have forced voting, it compels everyone in your state, every elected official in your state, to make sure that people have the ability to vote. And the reason this is important, why does voter suppression work, right? Why can people even have voter suppression in the first place? Well, the reason we can have voter suppression in the first place is because we don't have forced voting. If somebody's not able to vote for whatever reason, they just can't vote that election cycle, and that's it. Like, that's as far as it goes. If your voting is forced, your elected officials are also equally forced to try to find some way to make it to where you can vote at your convenience without issue. It says, you assume I can afford the $50. Well, yes, everybody's situation is going to be different. $50 for me would be very bad. Like, losing $50 sucks. Losing $10 sucks. But my point is that it's not necessarily a $500 fine, and even so, the environment that has compulsory voting is also the environment that is compulsory for elected officials to make it to where you can vote easier. Right now in Georgia, voting is decently difficult if you're not doing mail-in, and I believe that we actually tried to stop mail-in voting too, because we're in the South, and of course we did. A thing that has happened here in Georgia recently is that Kemp has closed several voting locations. Strangely enough, these voting locations seem to have been mainly around like redlined zones, which is technically illegal, but you know, if they were redlined when they were illegal, and then redlining was made illegal, and then those zones were never redrawn. But anyway, a thing that has happened in my state is that a lot of polling locations have actually been closed, so when people try to go vote, places that were closer to them, they aren't able to vote, and so they have to go further and further out, which for some people who don't, say, have a vehicle, is a little bit more difficult to do, or some people who work 2 or 3 jobs. It's not like they can just say, yeah, I'm going to take an hour out of my day with my vehicle I don't own to go vote. They can't really do that, especially if your mail-in voting has been suppressed as well.
Wasn't there a news story about, like, hours-long voting queues at some of those places?
Which is hours-long voting queues are a form of voter suppression, because if voting is inconvenient for you, that is a form of voting suppression. Voting should be convenient. It should be a thing that you are able and allowed to do easily, because when voting is easy, more people fucking vote.
Well, yeah, we have pretty high voter turnout up here because everybody gets their ballot weeks ahead of time. Like, most people just forget to fill them out.
Another thing that was brought out from Real Lock is that these things compound. It not only takes longer, like if you have 20 voting locations in a district, and then a thing that's happened with Kemp is that he'll knock it down to 1 voting location in the district. Now, not only is everybody having to travel a long time to get to the 1 voting location, they're having to sit and wait forever in line to do their voting. I think the last time I voted, it was like 45 minutes. Not the worst, but still decently long for where I was living at the time. And that is a problem, because it's not just that you're sitting and waiting in line, which of course is an issue when we're in the middle of a pandemic. Like, sitting and waiting in line is a fucking problem right now. But you have the compounded problem that they're having to drive further to get to these machines. And even at those locations, a thing that has happened to many of these locations is that they put all the voting machines in, but then there's not enough power on that particular circuit for the facility to power all the voting machines. So they can have 50, 60, 70 voting machines in an area, and only 25 of them be able to be powered. Now, if any of you know how electricity works in an area, you can generally like grab an extension cord and get electricity from another circuit into a room to power more machines, but that creates its own problems as well. But the fact of the matter is that a lot of these machines were ordered last fall. So they've had ample time to test these things. But then comes voting day, and suddenly the machines are not operating at the capacity they should have been, and they can just go, oops, we didn't mean for that to happen. Now you've got people sitting in line who've taken a little bit of time off of work to go vote, because legally they have to be able to, but they're sitting in line for hour 1, hour 2, hour 3, hour 4, because even though there's 100 people in line and 70 voting machines, only 20 are working. And if you've ever voted, it's not just mark down the guy you want in the president's office and then fucking leave. There's pages and pages of multiple different stuff at your local level too that you have a chance to influence.
Yeah, when Steve and I sat down to do our voting, our ballot was 2 sides, and I think we had maybe 30 local candidates, 17 or no, it's not 17, it's 7 or 8 bills that we had to vote on, and then the congressional candidates and the national election. It took us several hours to go through the voters pamphlet and decide all the who we were going to vote for. And that's assuming that you're not in person where you're going to have to make a split-second decision. This is assuming you've already done all the research. You have to remember all those names.
True, because you, for my district, or not my district, but for my area, if I'm going to vote, I can vote and say, yeah, I don't want Trump in office, so I'm going to vote for whoever I think is going to beat Trump, which sucks. I'd rather be able to vote for the Green or the Socialist Party, but apparently those are not options I
was excited to see the Socialist Party.
I was too.
The ballot.
That surprised me, because I expected the Green Party, right? I expected Howie Hankins, but then I saw...
I expected the Libertarians too.
Well, yeah, of course we expect JoJo. Fucking... If we get rid of all the regulations on businesses, they will stop exploiting their people. Ha! No, anyway, I'm not talking about JoJo right now. So I was excited to see the socialism part on the ballot, because that means that there is a reason why so much of the campaigning here in the South has been stop socialism campaigning, because they're gaining... we're actually gaining some footing. Not a lot, but some footing. And that's good.
Enough to get on the ballot, at least, which is... that's a step.
That is certainly a step, which is really good. I would like, and this is something that AOC talked about on the Among Us stream yesterday, I would like for after we get in Biden, that we just slowly start pushing them further and further left, so that the Democratic Party can start slowly functioning more like a socialist party. Because in the event that you cannot change your country from a 2-party system into a 3 or 4 or more party system, you can at the very least move the Overton window of the party that you have in power, which is a thing that has already happened on the right. They've moved further right, so don't fucking tell me it can't happen. They've already fucking done it.
So Allison R. says, voted today in Georgia, Trump, Biden, and JoJo are the only ones actually on the ballot here.
Wait, really? We don't even have Howie on the ballot here? That's so fucking bullshit. Not that I think Howie can win.
We had 6 people on our ballot.
Yeah, it should have. You should have had Democratic, Republican, Libertarian, Green
Party, and then 2 different socialist parties.
Yeah. Disagree. Bush is to the right of Trump. You can pretend that. That's fine. I'm fine you living in that fantasy. So it is... I
mean, Trump is up his own ass. He is not a part of any party. He is he is his own narcissist.
Like my issue between the two of them is that even if Bush is more economically further right, Trump is a fascist. So that I don't fucking care at that point. I stopped caring at that point. And the GOP has moved further to the right, period. I mentioned the GOP, the party, not the people. So, I mean, you can do the goalpost shift. That's fine. But it's dishonest. I talked about a party. You talked about a person. Let's stay on fucking topic. So
do you want to talk about some of the other crazy shit that has happened with Kemp? Because, like, the article that you sent me early on, when we were discussing this episode, really kind of shocked me if even a quarter of the allegations were true.
Well, let's run through a few things. So here's what I have in my notes. We have polling locations that get closed constantly, and no provisions have actually been put out in place to make sure that the fewer polling locations that are there are able to take care of the people that are being set up. Provisions as in food, snacks, stuff like that. Provisions as in having enough fucking power for your voting machines, having enough people on staff at your location.
These need to be regulations in your state. Like this is shocking to me, by the way.
Some polling locations don't have adequate power supply for the machines that they purchased in fall. Polling locations in primarily black districts are often closed, which is a thing that is a thing that Kemp had been doing a lot. Like when I mentioned examples of when you have 20 polling locations in a district and then suddenly it's down to 1. That's a thing that Kemp has been doing in like what were previously redlined districts that are still like not gentrified yet, which means that they are still primarily POC districts. So making it harder for people of color to vote is an issue. Now, when somebody tries to go, are you saying it's an issue because it's racist? Well, no, it's not technically racist, but here's the thing. It's not technically racist to try to support a particular vote, but it is de facto racist when the vote you're trying to suppress just so happens to be the black vote. Why would you want to support to get rid of the black vote? There are people who would argue against this and say, well, why would he just want to get rid of black voters? That makes no sense. Black people vote Democrat and Republican. True, they do, but primarily minorities and people of color in general primarily vote Democrat. That's historically been the case in the United States for the past 60 years. So why would a Republican make it harder to vote in more Democrat redlined zones? Because he's a Republican, and maintaining power is very important. Let's see here. There's another issue that happens here. Whenever you create these environments that have fewer voting areas, and whenever you have a history of your vote not working, like when you have a historically red state like Georgia and you're a blue voter or even a fucking green voter, that creates a problem too. You have another form of suppression, which is called the creation of voter apathy. What is voter apathy? Everybody in this audience has probably heard this statement at least once. And give me an H in the chat if you have, a G in the chat if you're so incredibly lucky that you haven't heard it. Why should I vote? It doesn't even change anything.
Mm-hmm.
You've heard it before.
I hear it a lot on the left, actually.
So, and I know we
the actual like left, not
we hear it from people on the socialism side who are like, well, why would I vote the Democrat? They're not actually aligned with my wants. And then a third party's not going to win. You don't vote for third parties so that
I've seen exactly one G in the chat.
Yeah, everybody, for the most part, with a couple of exceptions, have heard the moniker at some point, the saying at some point, why should I even vote? My vote doesn't matter. And you'd hear it for a variety of reasons. One of them is that there are actually states that don't have to, like their electorate doesn't have to vote in line with what the popular vote is in their state. And they're not legally held accountable for doing so. Not every state. But this is one of the issues with the Electoral College. There are people who would argue that the Electoral College is a good thing to keep because it means that like rural areas still have more of a say over like big, dense cities. And while I understand that argument, the problem is that we have states' rights that say that not every person who is part of the electorate has to actually cast their vote for the party their state voted for. You know. Isn't that great? Isn't that wonderful? Did you know that? That not every state has to actually follow the votes of its people? Now, does that mean you shouldn't vote? No. But because that is a thing that happens, you end up with, what was it? A form of voter suppression. The creation of voter apathy. Why would you create voter apathy? Well, if you're a red state, and this also happens to the blue states, I'm not saying the Democrats are off the hook here. I fucking hate the Democratic Party. But in both parties, if you have a law that says that your electorate doesn't have to actually vote with the people who, cast their votes at the voting polls, and they can just throw their vote to whichever presidential candidate that they so choose, that they think needs to get it. When you do that, you engage in voter suppression. Not only because you're literally not letting the votes count for the people who voted, but also because you have the ability to make it to where you create an environment systemically where people don't want to vote. Because why would you vote if your vote literally cannot count? Because it can be ignored. And even if you don't participate in this, even if you are a very responsible electorate, and when your state goes red, you go red, and when your state goes blue, you go blue, the fact that some states don't have to creates...
The fact that some specific delegates don't have to. Super delegates.
It creates that problem anyway. Because if you are in a state and you know that your electorate doesn't have to vote with you, why vote? It technically doesn't matter. So, also, another way you create voter apathy is by making it very inconvenient to vote. Why would I go vote? I take an hour off of work to go vote, but if I take an hour off of work at my $7.25 minimum wage job, I'm spending $2, $3 in gas, maybe $5 in gas, depending on where it is, and maybe it's not even an hour I have to take off of work, maybe it's the whole fucking day, because, of course, some polling locations are closed. So you're in this hypothetical situation where you've got to take a day off work, which you might not be able to do, to go vote, and it wouldn't be a day off of work if voting were more convenient. It would only be an hour. Even the hour is a problem. So you have to go vote. You want to go vote, but you're not economically in a position where it's a responsible thing for you to do, so you end up being apathetic. And I'm sure you can throw in some argument about individual responsibility. Well, they should have done an early vote. They should have done a mail-in vote. It doesn't fucking matter. It doesn't matter that they had the ability to do something else.
Well, and besides that, let's actually mention that in most states that are not like Cali or Oregon or Washington, if your state doesn't have national, or statewide mail-in voting, it's actually fairly difficult in a lot of states to get an absentee ballot. Most of the time,
you have to register for it. And no, you have to register for it.
You have to register, you have to apply for it, and in some states, you have to have, a medical emergency or a list of very specified reasons as to why you can't vote.
And let's get into one of the other problems if we're going to talk about mail-in voting, right? Let's talk about Kempy boy. Let's talk about something that happened in Kemp's time. So, before Kemp became governor, there's a thing he did. He created what was called the exact match policy in his first year of being Secretary of State in Georgia. Under the exact match system, eligible Georgians have the ability to be dropped off of the voter rolls completely for small mistakes, like having a hyphen that isn't written correctly. Wow, a hyphen. How many times when you have hyphenated something while writing, has it not been perfectly straight or the right length or whatever? Do you even know what those things are? Probably not. So, and we'll get into why that's a problem. It already sounds like a problem, right? People can just get dropped off because they hyphenated their name wrong, and the way it's considered wrong is purely fucking arbitrary. That's a problem, right? But it gets worse. While I'm reading off the rest of the notes on this, I want you to ask yourself what kind of names are more often hyphenated. Like, what race of people more often have hyphenated names? And it's not one race. It's a few. But if the answer is not white, you started on the right track as to why this is a problem. This also happens if you have a stray letter or even a small typographical error in your voter registration. If your voter's registration card didn't match it exactly to your driver's license. So, in a 2010 explanation, where he gave trying to defend the practice, Kemp said that the policy was designed to assure that the identity and eligibility of voters was always correct, and this was to prevent all fraudulent or erroneous registrations. Which, what did we talk about euphemisms before? What's the point of a euphemism? The point is not to be honest. The point is to smokescreen. So,
erroneous registrations. This reminds me of something like on paper. Oh, that sounds great, right? Like, that's such an amazing thing. It's so even-tempered, but just because it looks like it's a good thing on paper doesn't mean that it's not going to disproportionately affect a certain group of people.
Yep.
My favorite example of that is actually what happened in North Carolina when they banned voting from people whose only registered address was a P.O. box, and that basically stripped all people who lived on reservations of their voting rights. On paper, it looked fair until you think about the people it was targeting.
Yeah, but in execution, it doesn't matter if it's fair on paper. Execution gets knocked off. But let's continue. So what actually happened with this? Well, the Department of Justice got involved, and this policy was rejected by the DOJ, but it was eventually allowed to go into place as long as they adhered to certain safeguards. But the process was then halted in 2016. The state legislature passed a modified version that had the safeguards in place in 2017. However, whether or not those safeguards actually get figured out, whether or not the safeguards are actually there, that's not a thing that's really been determined there. So, on the exact match issue, exact match laws are considered to be a form of voter suppression designed to disproportionately target minorities, African American citizens, Asian and Latino voters. They account for 76.3% of the registrations that were dropped while these policies have been in effect. The exact match policies, it's not just a, who do you think this affects more? We have data on this. Hard data on this. That says that 76.3% of the dropped voters dropped due to the exact match policy were all non-white people. Now, let's run some numbers real quick for shits and giggles, right? Who here likes numbers? Give me an H in the chat if you like numbers. Give me a G in the chat if you fucking hate math and you hate me for getting into this. But
math is not fun all the time, but it is important.
But let's talk about this for a second. What percentage of the United States population is white? Because we're gonna run some numbers and see what this should look like, right? This is the same thing when we talk about systemic racism.
Well, actually, let's pull up Georgia's numbers. We can pull up Georgia's numbers really quick, because
Sure.
Georgia might actually have a higher percentage of the population, or a lower one, compared to the U.S. national, because certain parts of the country, for example, the Seattle area has a higher population of quote-unquote Asian Americans. I hate that term, but we do. That's the term that's used on demographic surveys, than most of the rest of the world. So if you start talking about like voter suppression of that in my area, well, you're going to have to talk about the actual percentage.
I've got the numbers pulled up here. It turns out, yes, you're right. There are fewer white people in Georgia than in the country at large, as far as the percentage is concerned. But it is that the population is 62% white in America, but in Georgia it's a whopping 60% white. So you lose 2%. That's it. 32% of the population in Georgia is black or African American, and then everything past that is under 5%. Asian is under 5%. Well, there's a 10% representation from Hispanic or Latino, and if you are see here. I'm looking. I'm actually fascinated by some of the other numbers in here. 23% of the population here is under 18 years. But anyway, point is, so based on those numbers, right? We should see of the voter drop off, 60% of that voter drop off should be white. And then 40% should be minorities, but it's not. That's not the case. It's disproportionately higher for minorities. This is the fun thing when you actually look at data and look at the end results of certain policies. They can argue that this isn't a bad thing on paper all day long, but when you look at the evidence, when you look at the data, you see an underrepresentation from the minority, but an overrepresentation in the voter drop-off for minority groups. I don't have to argue that through something like deontology, this is a racist bill. I don't. I can just look at a measurement of the end results of this and go, yeah, no, that ends up being racist. Whether or not you want to apply racist to it as a term, doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, what it is voter suppression. At the end of the day, that's what it is.
Voter suppression that just so happens to be targeted at a very specific demographic that make things quite hard for the GOP. And what's interesting is that when you start to look at this across the country, I know that the GOP, do you mind if I hop on a soapbox for a second and talk to my fellow lefties here for a minute? Our
Sure.
fellow lefties.
You know what? It's gonna say no, but it's actually saying yes. Bread is saying yes. It just shows no. You know what? Here.
So we're going to pick the bread up for a minute, guys. There's no Ocean to tell him to put the bread down, but bread is here. And I want to talk to my fellow lefties for a second, because I know that ContraPoints did an excellent video on this, but I want to talk about voter suppression for a sec, because that's not something that Natalie touched on in her video. When you look across the country at voter suppression efforts, they're disproportionately in Republican-run states and counties, and disproportionately affect minorities consistently. You look at it with things like the poll tax. You look at it in things like, in the 30s, 40s, and 50s literacy tests. But then you have, in North Carolina, you had the P.O. box. In Georgia, you've got the signature problems and the limiting of the locations, especially in so-called red line districts. You have the difficulty of getting absentee ballots. You have the lack of proper voter information. You have, in predominantly poor areas, difficulty accessing, which predominantly poor areas, I'm going to remind everybody, nationally tend to be disproportionately minority. This is just a fact. You have these tactics over and over that basically keep the GOP in power. You don't see this stuff near as much or as often in Democratic areas. In fact, I challenge anybody here to send me a story about actual Democratic voter suppression or liberal voter suppression in this country that does not come from Breitbart or Fox News. During this stream, if you can find that for me, I will eat my words. But what it seems when you look nationally is that the GOP does this. So I want to talk to my fellow lefties and state that when you guys try to tell us, hey, those of us that are voting, oh, you're selling out because you're voting, or, oh, they're equally bad. It's just choosing the lesser of two evils. I'm going to ask you, do you think Hillary would have refused to wear a mask or take COVID tests? Do you think that she would have ignored the scientific consensus? Do you think that she would have, baited China into a trade war? Do you think that she would have made disparaging comments about Native Americans and Black people constantly on national television, or called Mexicans sexual assaulters and other things? Now, the word he used is different, but I don't want to get Suris demonetized. Do you guys think, genuinely, can you tell me to my face that she would have done all of the terrible things that Trump has done? And can you find a Democratic state that has gone out of its way to do these things to minority voters?
I would say, as far as Hillary is concerned, I don't like her. The most I can say is that Hillary would have probably spent more time, on the war side front, because that is kind of a problem we have with, our more neoliberal people in office, is that generally they do more. I don't want to say they do more war crime, but
I mean, I'll completely admit that she's a hawk.
Yeah. Like, but I know a couple of idiots on the internet that are super happy whenever they find out that somebody's a hawk. They're like, oh my god, they're going to bomb brown people? My favorite! I don't get it. I don't.
I mean, and again, I'm not advocating that Hillary was the best choice. I actually canvassed for Bernie. Like, I also did voter registration at Hempfest for him. Like, I wasn't any, like, I was just a volunteer. I wasn't any kind of big person in the campaign at all, but I did actually do work for that campaign, like actual volunteer fucking labor. Like, I'm not saying that she was good and would have been the best president we've ever fucking seen. Like, even Obama had major fucking problems. But what I'm saying is, would the country be in the level of disaster it currently is if she had been at the helm? No. I can say that for certain. And at the very least, I know she wouldn't be spreading fucking conspiracy theories on Twitter.
Yeah. Which, you know. If for some reason she were engaging in conspiracy theories, they wouldn't look like QAnon does. And for those who don't know what QAnon is, I'm not going to do a brief here, but I do have an episode that was released yesterday where Objectively Dan talked with me and Ocean about QAnon. So if you want to know about that shit, there's another episode for you. That's a really good
stream. That's a really good stream, guys. Ocean got very confused. Like, very, very confused. I watched it yesterday while I was gaming because I couldn't catch it live. But that is worth watching on the playback if you guys don't know what's going on with QAnon. My border, his sister-in-law, actually, is a QAnon conspirator. And she ended up getting kicked out of her house because of how bad it got.
And you know what really sucks about Georgia? Majorly Green.
Oh, yeah.
In preparation for that stream, because whenever I do a stream where somebody else is going to be presenting, I do want to at least like prep a little bit, do some reading on the topics so that I can bounce back and forth with them. So doing the prep for the QAnon stream, every single news source I looked into that was talking about QAnon kept on bringing up Majorly Green, and I'm going to say right now, that was real upsetting, because she campaigned in Georgia. And she did not just campaign in Georgia and go, we like Trump, Trump is good, all that other fun shit. No, she literally would go, not only is Trump good, but Q is good, Q is great, and Q supports Trump, and we got to stand by Q. And I'm just sitting there like, why would I want an elected official to believe that people are just sucking blood out of babies for energy? Is that... Like, we can have conversations all day about whether or not we want religious bigots in office, which she is one of those two. But when I think about it, if somebody just thinks, this is base beliefs, we're going to do a mere Christianity thing here for a second. If somebody just thinks that me as a non-Christian is going to go burn in hell, that doesn't bother me too terribly much. I mean, I think it's a direct threat, but it doesn't bother me as much as them thinking that... I literally suck the blood out of babies' corpses in order to gain energy like a goddamn vampire who desperately needs filicide to survive. And that's a fucking thing that QAnon believe the Democrats in Hollywood are doing. So why people voted for that and why her signs were literally everywhere in my state. You couldn't go fucking 50 feet without coming across not across, but that too. But coming across a sign in somebody's yard. Just Majorly Green, stop socialism, Q. How is this a thing?
Sorry, first off, for guys that can hear the babies. They woke up and now they're getting rowdy. I have rat babies in my office. For those of you who are unfamiliar with my channel and the crazy that goes on, they were an accident. We did not know that the rats we adopted were pregnant. But I wanted to mention, I sent you an article a couple days ago. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because even y'all's Democrats are weird.
Everything's weird here. If you would like to talk about it, go ahead. I don't know which article you're referring to.
Vernon Jones crowd surfing and endorsing Trump.
Oh. So I'm not going to lie. I glanced and then looked away and just, my bullshit meter had already been filled. So I don't have a lot of context, but I'm sure you can provide me some.
Well, here, let me link you the article really quick so you can take a look at it, because this is kind of fascinating. I was like, holy crap, Suris, even y'all's Democrats are weird. There's the image.
Democrats supporting Trump is a weird thing to me.
So I'll read to you guys the article. I'll also copy paste it in the chat for those of you who are not familiar with it. This is a mobile version of the article because I just copied it off my phone. But Georgia State Rep Vernon Jones showed scant regard for COVID safety measures on Friday when he crowd-surfed over maskless Donald Trump supporters during the president's crowded campaign rally in Macon. Jones, a Democrat who has endorsed Trump in the 2020 election, also did not wear a mask, ignoring guidelines from the CDC and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which advise only small gatherings and social distancing. There is a glorious image of this. Jones faced backlash for the stunt on Twitter, where critics pointed out how the U.S. currently appears to be experiencing another peak of daily infections. Others criticized Trump for holding the rally, and others in recent days in the middle of a pandemic. And he tweeted about it. His response was to tweet and to call the rally peaceful protesters. Hashtag peaceful protesters, surfing with @real Donald Trump, hashtag deplorables, and hashtag peaceful protesters in Macon, Georgia. Put Georgia in the win column. We were 7,000 plus strong. This hashtag Trump train is about to steamroll over corrupt @Joe Biden, hashtag fake liberal news, and the @DNC feel the Vern.
So I'm going to go ahead and say this right now. He's trying real hard to be a Dave Rubin. I expect to see tweets from him along the lines of, why I left the left. I expect it. I expect it. Aside from the fact that Democrats aren't really left. But, you know, ignoring that fact, I expect to see why I left the left shit from him. I also like that The Guardian is calling him Captain COVID.
That's actually kind of great. Like, I'm not going to freaking lie.
Like, Daily Mail plays it straight, going, Representative Vernon Jones crowd surfs over the tops of... But when you look at the Guardian article, he's Captain COVID. Because the Daily Mail is going to play that shit straight because, well, they are called the Daily Hate Mail for a reason, right?
Yeah. So I had somebody in the chat ask for my like the link to my channel, so I'm going to post that for you guys as well. That's a link to my channel if you guys want to check it out. I mostly do polytheist content with an aim toward atheist and polytheist allyship. I talk a lot about politics. I did some collaboratives, including one with Raz about the trans issues with J.K. Rowling, and there's 3 of those that I've done, including one where I break down the like methods surrounding propaganda and how to spot it, and how to how to break it down. And I also do a lot of stuff about Hellenism. I talk about Greek religion, ancient and modern, and I talk about scholarly stuff. So for people that were asking about who the heck I am, there's a link to my channel if you guys want to check it out.
I have no idea who this person is. They just came onto my channel, and I'm very confused. Please get out of my house.
Yeah, I know. I just magically appeared in your life one day by accident because of a project that was supposed to work and might actually get revived.
Or you could just do a collaboration with the Gravel Institute, who seem to already be doing that now.
That's interesting.
Yeah, have you actually seen their channel yet?
I haven't yet.
They literally just recently started building up the video library for the left-wing PragerU.
Oh, that's amazing.
So getting in contact with them at some point, and seeing about doing some collaborative work might help, because if they've already got the groundwork laid, it is like I just became a patron of theirs 2 days ago, because my philosophy is that if they've already got the groundwork laid, then that works out, and until they do a trip up, then I'm golden. But the voice, their first video was voiced by the voice of the main character in Bob's Burgers and Archer.
The Gravel Institute is what would happen if Dennis Prager had wrinkles in his brain.
and wasn't funded by oil tycoons and the Koch brothers.
Koch brother.
Well, yeah, I forgot. Celebratory things did happen.
Yeah, y'all can hear the rats. I'm sorry. They're adorable.
This strand of hair keeps falling. I can't keep it up. I hate it so much.
So somebody asked me, do you, before we head out, because I don't know if you have anything more you want to talk about with Kemp, because, like, there's so much stuff that he has done. But if you want to, somebody asked, why should atheists and polytheists ally? And, like, I mean, you work with Ocean on Hammered Out and have been a repeat guest, the only repeat guest so far on my channel.
I could explain this very easily because it sounds like somebody would like this from an atheist perspective more than anything.
Sure.
All right. So, why should polytheists and atheists ally? Well, most polytheists, and this is you should not ally with every polytheist. If they are a folkist, for instance, don't ally with them. They're a piece of shit. But just in general, why is this a thing that you would want to engage in? Well, let me ask you something. Look in our government, and what religion do you see represented the most? And do you see them trying to change laws in favor of that religion? And when your answer is yes and Christianity, then you understand that we have a common enemy. Because my enemy is not Christianity, but people who think that things like a Christian theocracy are a good idea. That is a thing that you and most pagans will probably agree on.
I would argue that my enemy is fundamentalism, just in general, because I have to fight it in my own religion, too.
True, because you'd be dealing with that with folkists as well.
Yep, fuck focus, just saying. Can I get a fuck focus from my audience? Because I know I've got a few pagan friends in the chat.
From my audience as well. Fuck folkists, but do it in the right way, because if you do it the wrong way, they get a chance to breed, and that's not good. So, why would you want to participate in allyship? For one, atheists are a minority. That's just a fact. Part and parcel, that is a fact. Solidarity exists as a concept because when we work in small groups, we get a lot less accomplished than if we work in larger groups. If you're an atheist and you can work with a polytheist towards a shared goal, just numerically, you will have more people working towards that shared goal. This is the same reason why I actually have no problem allying with Christians as well, if those Christians are also against fundamentalism, who are also against harm. Because it's about pragmatism. It's about usefulness. You need numbers. And you're not going to get those numbers just by convincing everybody that you know that they should be an atheist too. Because you don't necessarily create an atheist activist when you do that. But you can get somebody who's already an activist who's politically aligned with you, who just doesn't hold your same religious beliefs or elsewise. It is a lot easier, a lot simpler, and a lot more effective to ally with those people for numbers. Now, should there be more atheist representation in general? Yes, just like I think there should be pagan representation too. Ideally, there would be representation for multiple religious groups as well as atheists. So whenever something is getting passed through legislation, you have the ability to actually have representation that can argue in favor of multiple perspectives when doing so. But can atheists do it alone? No, we don't have the fucking numbers for that. And if you think we do, then that is a wonderful delusion, and I sincerely wish I could gain your optimism. But I don't live in the world where that's the truth. I don't live in a world where that's reality. I live in a world where we are a minority in the United States and in most other countries. As a result, it is better to engage in solidarity with other people who have the same goals, who don't necessarily agree with you on religion. Because at the end of the day, a polytheist, for the most part, does not believe in religion the same way that a fundamentalist Christian does. For instance, Aliakai's beliefs are not that I'm going to die and go into a fiery hell because I didn't believe in any of her particular gods. Aliakai's beliefs are not going to end in an abusive relationship between the two of us because she always has an a priori of trying to convince me that her beliefs are true. Whereas fundamentalist religion generally has that.
Suris,
what?
How many times have I actually tried to convert you in any way, shape, or form?
Ever since we took the political compass test together, no.
Hey, I'm gonna make an anarchist out of you. That's not a religion.
True. So when it comes right down to it, when it comes down to how do we accomplish things? You accomplish things with numbers. You accomplish things with people. You don't accomplish things alone. And if you think you accomplish things alone, you might create a platform where you can convince people that your ideas are correct, but you didn't accomplish that alone, because by having that platform, you had people who were willing to believe in you, creating those numbers. You never, ever, ever accomplish anything alone.
So Anime Cat, I want to address something that you said. I don't consider myself a humanist. I'm a Stoic. They're different philosophies, but Suris and I still agree on more than we disagree on.
Yeah.
Because humanism, secular humanism, like itself often excludes the idea of pluralism, at least the way that a lot of people express that idea. I consider myself to be a Stoic. That is the philosophy I align with.
It's one of the reasons why I am a humanist, and technically I'd consider myself a secular humanist. But the last time that I went over the secular humanist manifesto, I had a lot of disagreements with it. So I was just like, I technically am that insofar as like those words exist. But as far as like any particular manifestoed version of it, no, not really. This is the fun thing about just engaging in pragmatism. I can look at things and accept them based on their usefulness, and that's like, that be my line. So again, to reiterate and probably put the nail in the head there, you accomplish more with people, you accomplish more with allies than you do creating a bunch of enemies. And when you think about it, why do you even have those enemies in the first place? Why are you, as an atheist, an activist against Christianity? Is it because you think that the beliefs are magical? Some people maybe, but most of the time they do it because they think that the beliefs are harmful and abusive. So if that's the case, most pagans agree with you too. They believe that those beliefs are harmful and abusive as well. You guys share goals and principles. You just don't share gods. But guess what? Polytheists sometimes don't share gods with one another. So it doesn't, like, they already have it baked in that you don't have to believe in their gods. Oh God, what?
Uh-oh. Apparently something happened. So at the risk of shameless self-promotion, I actually did a video on this, that was an open letter to anti-theists, talking specifically about how, in general, polytheists and atheists, we have a lot more in common than we don't. We're both religious minorities. We're both pretty heavily persecuted by, the religious majority, especially evangelicals, and fundamentalists. And both of us, a lot of the same assumptions are actually made about us. Part of the reason the whole atheist eat baby joke came out was because they thought they were demon worshippers. And that basically means they think they're us, because Christians think that the gods we worship are actually demons. Which I did a video on that too, by the way, if you guys haven't checked out my channel. I went into the history about how, like, Jewish people didn't even believe in demons, and the concept of demon actually was born because of syncretism with Hellenism. Yay, fun times. But yeah, that's the reason why you would want to do allyship. And like the weekly live show that I do, Xenia Bridge, which our first episode after the insanity that was the attempting to have Ocean on the first time and having somebody try to take down our stream, was actually Ocean and Suris coming on to talk about their allyship and why they started sort of this movement within the atheist community to be, at the very least, more tolerant of polytheism. Because, like, the majority of polytheists that you run into, I don't give a fuck what you believe in. I don't. It is just as valid for you, on your lack of personal experience with deity, to not believe in deity, or to have come to the conclusion on your own that there are no deities. I don't give a shit.
Well, that was
Is
good.
everything okay?
Yeah, so Raz had to go to the bathroom, and found a roach. Decided to go kill a roach.
Well, the one you found means there's 70 you didn't see.
Yes, if it was a baby roach, but I already know that that's correct because of the moisture damage. Because guess what? When you get water damage and there's moisture, that attracts roaches. So the water damage in the kitchen means there's roaches there. So I have thousands of dollars of repairs to do to this house. Just shoot me.
You gotta get on the YouTube hamster wheel.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. In the chat, should I do a stream as like a fundraiser trying to accelerate the process of saving up money for fixing that kitchen? Like, I don't know if I should. Because I've done...
Press H or the Greek phalanx, she'll hunt you down.
press H if you think that I should, because I'm not sold on the idea that I should. There's a part of me that's like, well, I know in a year's time I can save up enough money to do it. Just saving up from what I get on YouTube, because I generally have a little bit of extra to spare now thanks to Patreon. It's only usually about $100 though, so I can save that every week, or not every week, but every month, and eventually work up enough.
Long-term, high-value patron.
Hey, you're right.
We were friends before I became your patron, though. Like, people
True.
actually legit had accused me of, like, becoming your friend with money, and I was like, dude, I've known Suris since before anybody knew who the fuck I was.
It's true.
I met, for those of you who don't know, Suris and I actually met through formerly Pig Puncher, now Xander Hall, due to a project that we were trying to start called Collective U. So Suris and I became friends because I told him that, like, I wasn't trying to become his friend initially. I was like, I'm your scriptwriter and I need to learn how you talk. So we have to talk a couple times just informally so that I can learn the way that you speak. And then turns out we have a fuckload in common. So we became friends.
Rivardia says, I'm friends with Suris because I paid him. No. Meredith, you did not become friends because you paid me. I can think of, like, a handful of people who were patrons first and then became friends, but usually it's the other way around. But yeah, no. So if you guys truly think that that's a thing I should do, then I'll probably do a stream at some point to try to earn enough money there. I just need to figure out I don't know what that's going to cost yet. So if somebody in the chat knows, I'm assuming with a little over 100 people in the chat, one of you might know. So if I am replacing, let's say the kitchen's 15 by 8, if I'm replacing all the walls with wood because it's drywall, it's water damaged, and I'm replacing the floor with tile because, again, I don't want fucking water damage anymore. Cheap tile, like $1 per square, not... I can't afford more than that. And if I am replacing the cabinets, because they're also water damaged, cabinets and countertops with something like literally just like putting wood planks there for now. Nothing expensive. I can't afford to get granite countertops or even just countertops in general. So if I'm just doing that, and only one of the walls is going to have pressure-treated wood, because it's going to be the wall where the sink is, because... preventing water damage from happening in the future, and factoring in the potential that when we remove all of those counters to look at the extent of the damage, we already know we have to.
There's going to be drywall damage.
Well, I already know that. I already said replacing the walls. The walls are being replaced with wood. And
are you going to do fire retardant sheetrock?
There's not going to be any sheetrock. I'm just going to be using wood.
Okay.
It's going to be, because the community room I built out of pure wood, it's just going to be moving that over.
Yeah, like, you're going to have freaking, like, I'm trying to remember, it was Theseus's ship, I think was what it was.
Theseus.
Yeah, you're going to have Theseus's house. Is this still the original house if you replaced it board by board?
Which is, yeah, basically.
Angier brings up a good point, though, and this is the reason I made the joke threat. If you wait to save up the money yourself, more damage will occur from the neglect, making it worse and more expensive. That is the poor man's dilemma, and I completely agree.
That is called the Boots theory of economics, actually. That is the actual word for that. So, replacing all the walls, knowing that one of the walls will be pressure-treated wood because no more water there. The sink we can probably salvage. Like, the sink's metal, so it's fine. We're just going to be getting rid of the countertops because they were particle board countertops with laminate on them, which means that when the water damage happened there, it started to bulge the particle board. So, and there's pictures of that on Twitter for those who are curious. So we're replacing those. We don't have to replace any appliances because they're not damaged. They're just old. What would that look like, knowing that there might even be floor damage? Like, I don't know if there's floor damage because I haven't removed the shit to find out. But if there's floor damage, I'd likely just be replacing it with the board and then putting the tile on top of the board. So if any of you have done a job like that and know what that's going to cost, knowing that I'm doing it by hand, I'm not hiring a professional. I don't have that kind of money, and even if I did a stream, I wouldn't ask for that kind of money.
The biggest expense is going to be the pressure treated boards, because pressure treated wood is expensive as hell.
Yeah, it's like 11 per board as opposed to like 5.
Yeah, and if you're talking about doing an entire wall of planks like that, you're talking at least a couple $100 just for your wood.
Okay. So Titan Uranus said, what happened that caused that much damage? So it was actually a couple of things. The first thing is that no splashback or anything was installed in the house, and I've never been in a house without a splashback before. But that's not really where the majority of the damage came from. The majority of the damage came from the fact that our plumbing was installed incorrectly, and we didn't know. So it's been leaking for a year. We've had the house about a year and a half now, I want to say, something like that. So it's been leaking for an entire year, just warping the boards underneath, and it finally got to the point where water was just gushing out of it, and we finally noticed it. As a result, it's just built up damage, and apparently it built up to the point where it creeped up into the drywall. And I thought that it would just be like on the floor, because I know that the entire bottom of the sink is warped down like this, but apparently there's issues back there too, because the entire drywall up to, if I'm standing up to here, has drywall damage. Has, like, I can
Mold.
I can push my thumb into the drywall just ever so slightly, and it just goes right through like it's a sponge.
That happened to us with our dryer and our washer. Our dryer was, when we first moved in, it took us 3 years to figure it out, but our dryer was leaking natural gas, and our water had a crack in it, and our washer had a crack in it. And we figured it out because the water damage got so bad that it finally started leaking into the drywall and the siding all the way to the doorway at the bottom of the stairs, which I've shown you pictures of my house, so you kind of have an idea of how far that had to go.
Yeah.
But I personally, like, as a person who has done some of these kinds of projects, I would go on the higher end and probably budget $1,500 to $2,000 for that. That way, if you're covered, if there is extensive damage, that's not going to cover you if there's actual structural damage, but that will cover you for floor and walls and basically.
Yeah, because I budgeted about, like, the floor is probably going to be, say, $300 to $350.
Yeah, that wall is going to be your biggest expense, and that's going to push you up to at least $1,000. But if there's more damage than just the floor and the wall, then you're going to need closer to $2,000.
Said, do I know if the structure beams are damaged? If so, I'm fucked. I do not know. Like I said, until I remove that drywall, I won't know.
Because the thing is this would be probably a $5,000 or $6,000 project if you were getting it done. But since you're doing your own labor, I'd say parts are going to be at least $1,000 to $2,000 because you can't get the bulk buying like discounts that the big companies can.
Gotcha. So Mathematical Cabbage says, I hope there's no structural damage. Yeah, that's where I am as well. Likely when I get to the point where I'm repairing it, I will just go ahead and, like, take pictures of everything happening. So if you guys want to see the extent of the damage, then go right ahead. But like I said, on Twitter, I've got a couple of the pictures of, like, the areas where the thumb just went through. Because at first I thought it was just the area behind the sink, because I was like, oh, well, it just means that, you know, this area will need to be replaced, because maybe it's just that I was not very careful when doing dishes.
Oh no,
one
sheetrock
day.
Is porous as fuck. That's
so,
your entire wall.
and then I moved my thumb further down the line and just pressed and went, no, that's the whole fucking wall. Mm-hmm. Oh no.
That's how we figured out our roof was that bad, was because we were starting to get divots in parts of the roof, and the guys were like, oh no, that's older stuff, and I'm like, no, that's a leak. And then $35,000 later.
Mm-hmm.
Homeownership is expensive, guys.
Yeah. There was a question about whether or not it would be covered by insurance. So the insurance that I have, that I'm dropping and I'm switching over to something more expensive, is not going to cover shit like that for one reason, and that's that I got a ridiculously high deductible. I was making barely enough to get by when we got the house. So the deductible was very high. So as an example, if you guys remember when the branch fell into the roof and, like, skewered the roof and literally almost killed me, it was actually in this room, because this used to be the bedroom. We've turned this into the office, but the hole is right there where it came down. It's not a hole anymore. It's been repaired since then. But when that happened, I called the insurance company and tried to see if they would cover it, and they said, nah, it doesn't sound like you have over $1,500 of damage, so we can't really cover that. Like, okay, because that's my deductible at the time was like $1,500. So if your guys are saying that the project is going to be like $1,500 to $3,000, it's already within the realm that I wouldn't be able to deal with it anyway. But anyway, my plan is get this done, pay this out of pocket, and just go ahead and go with new insurance. I need to go with new insurance anyway because when we bought the house, we didn't have that extra room, and now we do because I built it. So now I have to insure more square footage. So that's the thing I already have to do anywho. So yay, fun shit.
Lord Bleck points out that the next presidential debate is tomorrow. That you could do a fundraiser while you're doing a watch along if you wanted to.
Are they actually doing their debate?
Yeah, they are. Apparently, they're actually the Electoral Commission, the Debate Commission just made it so that they can mute their microphones after their 2 minutes, so they can't go over even by a couple seconds, and they can't cut each other off.
Good.
Trump was furious about it, but they're doing that even though it's an in-person debate.
He's just like, they can interrupt you. I don't like that. Then shut the fuck up. You're the reason they had to do it.
Yeah, there were breaking news stories today about that and yesterday. So, yeah, Trump's not happy about it. But to be fair, I think that's going to be good for everybody because everybody likes to go over in those things, even when they're not constantly cutting each other off. So kind of having to be concise, it's going to be interesting to watch that happen.
Yep. What time is it? Because it depends on the time because tomorrow's the day that I do therapy. So I'm...
give me a second. I'm a mute so y'all don't have to hear my loud as fuck keyboard and I will get you a time.
Yeah, so I might not be able to, because I guess we'll see. We'll find out. I've been trying to just deal with this thing on my own and
9 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Okay, then that's fine. I'll be able to manage that.
That's when I normally do my premieres on Thursdays, but this week, this week's video is actually going to be coming out next week because, as you guys can hear, my voice is in no shape for recording. I am way quieter than I normally am and cannot emote very well, and I hope that people have not been bored by the information because of this.
I will take one last question before this particular stream is over, because this stream is not going to be over. I'm just going to transfer it into a gaming stream. But it was asked, do you think a eugenics program would be okay in a situation like Idiocracy? And my answer is no. I don't think a eugenics program is good. Period. I
don't think we understand. Even if you put aside completely morality, look at what has happened to dogs when we have bred them as humans for specific traits. There are dogs who have a hard time breathing because of how short their noses are.
Or they can't breed without help, or they get hip dysplasia and can't walk after 5 years.
Or they can't handle, or they have to be C-sectioned because they're too small for the size of their babies. Now, if we manage to do that with life forms that a lot of people would consider simpler, and I say this as somebody who does not refer them to themselves as owning any of their pets because they are their own lives, then if we can't even manage to do that with dogs, what the hell makes anybody think that a eugenics program of any sort at any time could possibly be successful, even if there weren't the ethical considerations?
And moreover,
it's just not a thing that humans are capable of doing.
And on top of that, even if they were capable of doing it perfectly, we can grant that premise too. Because this was asked to me by a friend.
We've got people that are like, what about castrating the least intelligent 50%?
No.
Oh, good God.
No. You would that is a fucking dog whistle. Don't even. For that, you have to have a measure of intelligence. And that measure of intelligence classically has been something like IQ, which has been used to excuse things like the Bell Theory. And guess what? We've already fucking done that before. We've already sterilized people based on IQ before. It's already happened. No.
I'm going to, can I get mad for a minute?
Go ahead. Go right ahead.
All right, guys.
By the way, it's called genocide, but.
Yeah, and hi, guys. I'm Native American, for those of you who don't know. I'm a half-breed. I'm Haida. And there are members of my family who were living when I met them. They died in my teen years. But I have great aunts who were sterilized by a U.S. government eugenics program that was trying to stop the so-called savages from spreading our genes. This happened when we were put in internment camps. I'm sorry, they actually called them residential schools, but they basically were internment camps for kids. They talked about killing the Indian to save the man, and they've forcefully did a number of different, they did castrations, they did basically the equivalent of I'm trying to remember what they're, hysterectomies. They sterilized tons of Native American people. Like, you wonder why there's so fucking few of us. Well, that's part of the reason why. And they did that to people who were disabled as well. They did it to people with other types of mental illness, like actual mental illness and not what people call mental illness. They did it to Black people. They did it, and currently the Trump administration is allegedly doing it to people in the current concentration camps at the border. There have been multiple whistleblower reports of Mexican women receiving hysterectomies that were not medically necessary and not having the procedure explained to them. So if you guys want to talk about fucking eugenics, this country already tried that.
Also, the exact name they used for one of the doctors who was most prolific for this was called the uterus collector, if that would give you an idea of how this goes. So when you ask about castrating the lowest 50%.
Oh, and by the way, that's also happening in Georgia, since we're on the topic of Georgia.
Yep. Now, let's also point out that even ignoring the fact that we have done this before, are doing this, all this shit, and that it is genocide, let's also talk about the fact that if you want to get on that topic, you would have to believe that intelligence was genetic. Which, if you believe that intelligence is genetic, then you believe in Lamarckian theory for evolution. Lamarckian evolution is not the same as Darwinian evolution. That has been thoroughly disproven.
Lamarck thought that people could pass on their acquired traits, yep, meaning things like education and like physical fitness, to their offspring, which this is not quite the same thing as what is the actual term for it? I'm trying to remember. It's the term for the epigenetics. That's what it is. This is not the same thing as epigenetics, which is environmental factors causing certain genes to activate or not. This is the belief that genes are created based off of your physical fitness or education or other things. Eugenics was based off of that, and it has been so thoroughly, utterly destroyed. Like, beyond a shadow of a doubt.
So, there's also the conversation to be had about how we measure intelligence. Ignoring IQ, which I know is bullshit. A lot of times, certain things that we consider to be signs of intelligence are only signs of proficiency in a given area or a given field. And that proficiency can be affected by environment. It can be affected by birth. It can be affected by things that you're raised in. It can be affected by your access to education. So if you are born to a parent who's a philosopher, and then the other parent is an economist, you likely will hear things from them going forward that will mean that you are better equipped to be either of those like careers later on. It doesn't make you any more or less of a prodigy. Your environment you were born into just gave you a predisposition to that. Someone might say that, they're just naturally smarter. But are they really is there any less potential in somebody who grew up in a blue-collar environment where their parents couldn't talk about anything other than the movies they watched last night? And then they don't get exposed to any of those higher-level ideas until college, where they're forced to confront them on a day-to-day basis. They didn't get the same environment, but they still have the same potential. But because they were not granted the better environment to begin with, someone might measure their IQ or whatever they want to, and then go, actually, you need to be sterilized. Because your parents were blue collar.
Well, and on top of it, like, let's talk for a second about neuroplasticity, because when we talk about eugenics, people don't talk about this particular concept near enough. Are you familiar with the concept, Suris?
The concept of what again?
Neuroplasticity.
unfamiliar with the concept because I've heard people try to argue neuroplasticity as a concrete defense against trans people, apparently.
Wow, that's not how neuroplasticity works. Anyway, so neuroplasticity, for those who are not idiots, is the idea that what you do, what you focus on, what you learn, that your environment shapes your brain and so do your actions. So the example that's sort of classically given when you first learn about it in psychiatry or psychology classes is a taxi driver in New York, because of the fact that like GPS signals and stuff are terrible, has a much larger visual spatial cortex than your average college student, say, would, or than your average person. And when they stop being a taxi driver and retire, within a couple of years, that visual spatial cortex actually shrinks. The reason for that is that more connections and denser matter in that area, because of constant use, actually physiologically reshapes your brain to be better at doing that task. It's the whole practice makes perfect, but actually physically proven. So when you talk about quote unquote intelligence, you're talking about something that is far, far more complex and varied and depends entirely on somebody's experiences in addition to genetic factors. I'm not going to say that genetic factors do not affect the expression of one's intelligence. As somebody with ADHD, for example, if you were to test me on my focus when I'm off my medication, you're going to get a genetically predisposed different result than the average neurotypical person. But that does not mean that I'm less intelligent than you. It means that my brain functions differently. And if you get me and test me on my focus for something that, say, I'm obsessed with, like Hellenism or my work, you will find a completely different result than if you test me trying to clean a toilet.
Or like for me, if you try to test me on my focus on math, for instance, you're trying to teach me a mathematical concept. Unless it's statistics, I will probably not care. My focus is going to go everywhere. Evidence of this, I failed geometry in high school, in 9th grade, because I was trying to pay attention to the teacher exclusively. The year that I passed geometry was because I had my DS with me and was playing Pokemon the whole damn time with one hand while taking notes with the other. Having something keeping my attention and keeping me awake in class kept me awake enough to take my fucking notes and focus on the teacher. I had to have something I actually cared about going on at the same fucking time.
Titan offers like stuff against the neuroplasticity argument for trans people if you want him to message you.
Go ahead and send those to me. I'd like to put them into a catalog for use, though the only person that I'd have to use them on is Jill. It was Jill who provided that argument. So if the person you beat was Jill, thank you. That's fucking funny to me.
Yeah, you're never, I mean, it's never, like, you never know what's going to catch on in turf circles.
True. The idea that something espoused by Jill would catch on in turf circles speaks more to the degeneracy of turf circles than anything else. So, with that said, I believe we thoroughly answered the questions, and we've explored these particular topics insofar as they relate to our geographical positions.
Yeah, we're on opposite sides of the country here talking about coastal stuff, and you're out in the south.
So, that all said, if you guys enjoyed, go ahead and leave a like. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. All the shit that YouTube wants you to do. Also hit the bell notification icon. That said, there is a link to Aliakai's channel in the description below, as well as the links to the articles that she mentioned earlier. So go ahead and check that out. She's also put...
you did not put me in the description.
Check the description, Aliakai. You are,
in
fact,
is.
there.
Oh, there it is. It's just, I didn't see it.
Well, truthfully, the first 30 minutes of the show, I didn't have it in there. I forgot to put it in, and I corrected my mistake.
So I was correct originally, because I was going to tell you that you forgot.
You were correct before, but I fixed it. It's there now. I put it there a decent while ago, so it's good. So if you guys enjoyed, do all that stuff, please go subscribe to Aliakai. I'm trying to prevent myself from burping in the middle of an outro. That's going to be a failed endeavor. So that all said. Aliakai, if you have anything you want to close with before I transfer into the next segment of the stream, because I'm not ending. We're just transferring into a gaming stream because I want to experiment with doing that a little more.
I'm going to quote Samuel L. Jackson, and that is, he's using the same old tricks to try and keep you from voting, but you need to get out there and do it, if nothing else, but just to spite Donald fucking Trump, because he doesn't want you to, and that means that your vote fucking counts. If you're dealing with voter apathy, guess what? This is the election to prove that voter apathy is not the best position. You want to be disproven? You want a better chance? This is the time to do it.
Agreed. And you know what? Honestly, if everybody in the United States voted, I would have less of a problem with people voting third party. Because we would just, by numbers, have more people voting anyway. And would work out.
Well, honestly, we need ranked choice voting, and one day you should do a stream about that, because ranked choice voting
True.
will solve a lot of those problems.
Because that allows you to actually do your third party voting without it negatively affecting everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Because for those who don't know, quick thing with ranked choice voting, if the person you're voting for gets knocked out for any reason, then your next choice in line, your vote gets counted for them. So if you go, hey, my first vote is Howie Hankins, but my second one is Biden, then in this particular case, the votes would go for Biden at the end because Howie Hankins doesn't have a chance there. But because the vote was cast for Howie Hankins to begin with, they might get their 5% vote that they need in order to get the funding for the Green Party in the next election, which literally solves those two fucking problems. So, just so you guys know, the United States system for democracy can be improved quite a bit, and there are already systems in place that can take care of that. We just have to apply them. So.
But yeah, that's my closing words. If you guys are interested in any of the stuff that I brought up earlier when I described the things I do on my channel, as Suris said, link is in the description below. I just got monetized fairly recently. I'm really excited, but I have only been around as a solo channel for about 6 months. So if you guys check me out and you like what you hear, let me know in the comments that Suris sent you.
And with that said, that is the end of this segment.